Okay, so in this video, we're going to kick off our development for a student admin app where we can add students and display students, add courses, display courses, and we'll add some more buttons in later on where we're letting students select courses they want to take. So the students and their courses. So this is just the start. We're going to add more in later. Okay, and at the moment for this video, we're going to create it so we're going to make the add student screen. So you can add a student, and it's doing validation. Okay, and so we can check if the student phone number is blank or whatever, and whether an email is blank. Okay, and then we can add a student. Okay, we've also got clear student wide up and return to menu. Okay, so that's all we're building for this video. Just a simple add student screen with add, clear, and return. And so that's part one. Hope this is useful. There's going to be more parts later. Don't forget to click the like if you like the video. Okay, so in this video, we're going to extend what we did in a prior video and create a little data entry app. Okay, so, and we'll probably make this multiple parts. Okay, so let's start. We'll create a new project, JavaFX. We're doing SceneBuilder, so we'll go FXML application. This is going to be a data entry app for students and courses. So student admin app, if you want to call it that, student admin app. Everything else is fine. I want to make my main class student admin app main or tester or driver or whatever you want to call it. Or will I just make it that? No, just make this app will be fine. Okay, so this will be what runs when the app first starts. I'll click finish on that. And here we're just going to follow through what we did in the first video on multiple parts, having multiple scenes. Okay, so into our little scene view, and so FXML document controller is our main menu. So let's add some items. Get rid of that. There's a little label there as well somewhere. There it is. Delete that. We'll add some more buttons. Go to the controls. Oops. We'll go add student. And we'll have a display all students. And we'll have courses as well. Add courses. Add course. Okay, so adding a course, and then we'll display all courses as well. So pretty sort of standard stuff. And we might also have an exit button too, if we could expand that a bit. Another button, we'll have another button called exit. And we'll also put a heading on there as well, make it a little bit neater. So I'm going to add a label to the top. And we'll call it Student Admin version 0.01. Okay, so it's a very early version. We'll come over here to the font size and make it say 24. Yep, 24, and make it bold. So I'm just using little drop downs here. Setting bold. And that's not too bad. Pretty ugly, but that's fine for what we want to do for starters. So we've got add a student, display all students. Just move those so they're together. Add a course, display a course. Just move those so they're together. Okay, everything's lined up fairly neatly. And so that's our main menu. So now let's do add a student. Okay, so we'll come up here to our. Well, actually, we'll go back to NetBeans, and we'll click on our package, which is that one, and go right click, new, empty FXML folder or XML file, and I'll call this one add student. Or if you prefer to put the topic first, you can go student add if you'd rather. So we can put all the student ones together: student add, student display. Okay, so student add, FXML, whatever you want to call it, it's fine. You can always change it later. Click next. We're going to make a new Java controller. We're going to create a new Java controller, and yep, that's what it'll be called. And you can actually reuse existing controllers, but I think it's best at this stage anyway to create a new controller for each scene, or for each XML file, and just click finish. Okay, so we've got the XML there, and let's go double click on that, and it opens in SceneBuilder. Okay, so here we want to have, so this is add a student. This is our add a student. Okay, so let's add a student, and again we can change the size, so it's, I like 24, make it bold. That's a heading. You can make it centered if you like. It's centered. So now we want labels and text fields, so we can type in student name, student email, student whatever we want, student ID. Actually, we'll have the ID allocated automatically. Okay, so let's type in, let's change to containers, and we'll come down here to grid pane. It's not a bad one, grid pane. It's one of my ones I like. And we'll just resize that to make it the size of that we want. And it's got 3 rows and 3 columns, but you can easily change it. You can add more columns or add more rows if you want to. It's really easy, but I think that's fine for now. And we'll add some controls. So we'll add a label and another label. I'm just dragging from the controls menu over here, left clicking and dragging it across until the grid appears, and then dropping it. Okay, and this is going to be name. I could say student name if I wanted, but name, phone, and email. Okay, so just 3 things I'm entering. Name. I could add more if I wanted to. So down here you can right click and add more if you want to. Okay, let's add some text fields over here so the user can type in some data. And so we've got text fields right down the end, text fields. So that allows us to do a single line input. Now if you position the text field so it's in the center there, it'll expand side to side, but it won't expand top to bottom. So it's if you position them nicely, they won't expand to fill top to bottom, even though you can change it later if you want to. So I'm going to drag that, and I'm going to drop it just in the center there, so it expands left to right, but not top to bottom. And same over here. Okay, that's all nice. So if I did want to add rows into that grid, I could click on the grid and go right click, and I could click down here, and there's add a row above, add a row below, add a column left, add a column right, those sort of controls. So that's how you add things. You click in the grid and go and right click, go down a grid pane, and you can add rows and columns if you want to. You can also do it through the properties if you want as well, but do it through the GUI if you like. Okay, so we want a couple of buttons. We want to add student, or just add if you want to just say add. Maybe a clear all, and how about an exit button? Okay, and that's basically all I want for now. We might come back and add more things to it later. We might come back and add a combo box later and that sort of thing. Okay, so, but that'll do us for now. Before you do anything further, you want to make sure all of these things have got IDs in SceneBuilder, and the buttons have got IDs. So we'll do that next. And I might just remove the exit button, the button from that. Just exit. Or even better, return to main menu. Okay, just like we did in the multiple scenes video. Okay, so add a student. We're going to give that an ID. We'll come down to code properties and expand that. So we're going to call that add student button. Okay, and you can see we're keeping the name of the names on the label and the name of the button really nicely in line. Make sure they're the same, and you can't go wrong. We'll call it one clear all button, And this one here is return to main menu. Return to main menu. So why am I giving these a lowercase first letter? And I'll call that button as well. Okay, so clear all is lowercase clear, uppercase for the other words, because these are the names we're going to use in code, and that's the naming convention Java follows for all names of fields and variables in classes. Okay, so that's the camel case notation we're following. We'll highlight that as well and go Control C. Go into action here and go Control V and go handler and oops, okay. So what we're doing is we're adding handler on here. So that's going to be what runs when we double click the button. When we click the button, it's going to run this handler, which we're going to create when we build the scene or build the controller. Clear all. So double click on that and go Control C. Come in here and go Control V and type handler. So that's a handler that's going to run when that button is clicked. And return to main menu. Double click on that. Control C. Click down there. Go Control V to paste and type handler. Okay. So now our buttons have got nice IDs and nice the handles all described, so we know what we're going to do. Down here we have the text fields, so let's click on that first text field, which is name text field. So we'll call it name text field. Okay, that doesn't need a handler. This one's the phone text field, and this one here is the email text field. Okay, and that's all we need to do for those. So each of our text fields have got, so the name text field's got a name text field, the phone's got the phone text field, and the email has got the email text field. Okay, so everything's nicely labelled and named, and now we're ready to go back so Control S, save that. If there's any other controls you want to add, do it now, is probably a good idea, although you can regenerate the controller later if you need to. Okay, let's go back to NetBeans. And we'll click on our FXML and we'll right click on that and go make controller. Okay, and what that does is it refreshes the controller, this file here, with the latest version of what the scene shows you. So all the buttons and the text fields that are named are now in here. Okay, and they got the FXML tag there. So name text field, phone, email, add student button, clear all, and return to student. And down here we've got our handlers. Add student handler, clear all handler, return to student, return to main menu handler. Okay, so all our handlers are there and all our buttons and components that we need to deal with in code are there. We don't need to deal with those labels. So we haven't given those names. They've got no name. We don't care what they're called because we never need to refer to that name field or name label in our code. If we did need to, we could call it name label and then we could refer to it in code as well. I'll give you an example, name label. So if we want to change that label so it's red when there's an error or something like that, we could give it a name, Control S to save, back to our scene controller, right click on the FXML and go make controller. So we right clicking on the FXML file, make controller, and now the labels appeared as well. Okay, so now we can interact with that label through our code as well. Okay, so here I've opened up Explorer, Windows Explorer, and I've navigated to our multiple scenes project that we did in the prior video, and I've come down to the source area, multiple scenes, and that's the little utility class that we developed. Remember that in our multiple scenes? I want to now drag that and copy it into our student admin area. So I'm just copying it in there. So it's in the source in the student admin app in the package area. Okay, so that's where our FXMLs are, the main menu, and the student add scene, and there's our utility class. So now we can use that whenever we want to change scenes, which is much better. Saves us writing those 5 lines of code, remember? Okay, so back to NetBeans. And so what we want to do when we quit to main menu is, and I'll just put those, I like having the curly brackets so they line up like that. I've seen so many students over the years leave the one over there and this one here, and they end up in a mess with how many curly brackets they've got open and closed. So I'm always fixing it for my students. So I'm just in the habit of doing that code for me. I don't leave that curly bracket over there unless I can squint and look away. Okay. Okay, so return to main menu. I've got it so that when they click that, we just open our main scene, which is that openfxml document.fxml. Okay, so we're just calling our utility class change to scene, which is a little app or little method we developed back in the multiple scenes video. Okay, if you want to pop up a dialog there to display a dialog whether you want to do it or not, you could pop up a confirmation dialog. Are you sure you want to quit to main menu or whatever? You could do that if you wanted to. We're not going to worry at this stage. Let's add a student. Okay, so what do we want to do? The first thing we want to do is validate inputs. So validate inputs. If there's any errors, we want to display an error dialog and stop. We don't want to keep processing data and validating data and whatever. So if there's an error, we display an error and stop. Don't do anything further. Okay. And if everything's valid, if all inputs are valid, we will create a student object, and why don't we add them to an array list and add them to an array list. Okay, and so we can do that. So let's do some validation. So here we're talking about the name text field for a student. We're going to start with a name. So that's the GUI component we need to interact with. And with text fields, you've got getText and setText. There's other methods as well, but getText and setText are the main two. So we want to get the text to the text field and see what it contains. Okay. And what I usually like doing when I'm doing validation, when there's multiple inputs and things, I like setting a flag, a boolean. Boolean data valid, and set that equal to true, and try and prove it wrong. Okay, so as soon as I find out if data's not valid, I set data valid to false, and then I skip all the other steps, which we'll see in a second. Okay, so if data valid is still true, I do that for the first one, even though it's got to be true. We've only just set it there. I do it for the first one because people can rearrange your code and do validations in different orders later. And I want to make my code so they can just move the if statement and everything will still work. Okay, so I like trying to make my code so it's really robust. Open curlies, close curlies. So we want to get the name text field. If name text field, which I copied and pasted, we want to get the text of that. Okay, and we want to get the length of that. And if that's equal to 0, then we've got a problem. We've got a blank name, which isn't allowed. Okay. Now, what if the person who's doing the data entry typed in a bunch of spaces? We want to get rid of all those spaces from the leading edge, from the leading spaces and the trailing spaces. Or if all I did was type in spaces, we want to get rid of all of those. And that's where a good little method called trim comes in. Trim. Okay. So we're getting the text out of the text field. We're trimming it, which means remove all leading and trailing spaces, and we're getting the length of that. What's left after we've removed the spaces from the start and the end. Okay, so let's open the curlies and close curlies, and now we want to show it. We could show the error message in a dialog, or a label, or wherever. Okay, we're going to show it in a dialog. So J option pane dot show message dialog, and we have null followed by the error in quotes. Name cannot be blank. Just a nice simple error like that. Don't forget your semicolon at the end. And the other thing we want to do here is set data valid to false. So we've come up with an error. We're setting data valid to false. An error has occurred. Okay, so that's our first bit of checking. Now let's go to our second part of checking, and we're basically going to copy that. Control C, Control V, and we're going to do it for the next input, which is our phone text field. Okay, so phone text field dot get text dot trim dot length equals 0. Phone cannot be blank. Okay, data valid is false. Okay, so you keep following that pattern for all your inputs. If data valid's true, do the next bit of checking. If there's an error, display an error and set data valid to false. And then come on to the next bit of checking. If data valid's true, do the next bit of checking. If there's any errors, display an error, data valid's false. Come on to the next bit of checking. Eventually, you'll have validated all of your inputs, okay? And it's time to do the actual processing, okay? Let's do one more. We might as well do it for the next one, which is email. And let's say, sorry, I've just, if email text field dot get text, leave that over there, and it's going to be email, can't be blank, okay? And let's say, oops, I need to put the closing curly there, somehow that disappeared. And there, closing curlies, open, close, open, close, open, close. Okay, and email can't be blank. Okay, so what if you want to also make sure that the email address contained an ampersand sign? You could do another one, couldn't you? If data valid's true, if name text field dot get text dot contains an ampersand is false. Okay, so if whatever they typed into the email address, if it doesn't contain an ampersand, we can say email address, email not valid. Okay, because all emails got to contain an ampersand. And so on. So you can do all that sort of checking as well if you want to. The ampersand's got to be in the middle. There's got to be something before it and something after it. There's lots of checking you can do an email address, and it's not as easy as you might think. Okay. But anyway, okay. So let's assume we've done validation for everything. So we've got the email, two bits of validation done for the email address, one bit for the phone. We could check that the phone length is. We could take all the digits out, or take all the digits out of the phone number, and check that there's 7 digits or 8 digits or 9 digits or whatever there's got to be for your area. Okay, so we could check the length of the phone number of digits. We could remove everything that's not a digit and see what it is. So there's all these different layers of checking we could do. But that's the basic checking we're going to do for this app. Okay, and then finally everything's valid. So we want to grab those first 2 lines there and paste them down here. And finally we got to the stage where everything's valid, and we want to create a student object. Okay. Now we haven't created a student class yet, so let's create a student class. We'll do that next. Okay, a data class. Okay, so we'll come back to our source tree over here, and we'll right click on the package and go new, just Java class. That's what it is, just a basic Java class. Okay, and we'll call it student and finish. Okay, so this is our basic student data class, and again I'll line up the apps, the curly brackets, so that because I've just seen so many students make errors there. We want some private data fields, private string name, and we want phone number and email. Just the data that's in the GUI there. We want to be able to store that somewhere, email, and so on. If you've got more data, still more data. Okay. We need a constructor and student. So this is just our default constructor. There's no parameters. We'll create a parameterized constructor, which takes all 3 of our fields that we've got so far. So the name, phone number, and email. Okay, so we're passing through all 3 bits of data that we know about for this class, and we're going to say the class field, which is this.name, is equal to the name passed in. Okay, and do that for each one. So phone, this.phone equals phone, this.email equals email. So in other words, the class field email, which is that one, is equal to the email address passed in, which is this one. Okay. Now let's fix up our now that we've got a parameterized constructor, we can invoke that, and we can invoke that here, and we can just say this, double quotes, double quotes, double quotes, and this is invoking or calling our parameterized constructor. parameterized constructor, and we're passing through 3 blank strings. In other words, name and phone and email will be blank if we just create a class object by calling the default constructor. And then here you want to add the usual setters and getters. Okay, so public string, we're getting a string, get name, and that's just going to return a name. Okay, and so on for... Now you can actually get NetBeans to generate this code for you. For the students at my level that I'm teaching, I like them creating this themselves, so it just becomes habit for every class they create. They create a data class, they create the default constructor and at least one parameterized constructor, the accessor methods or the getters, the mutator methods or the setters, and toString and anything else we need, copy constructors, equals methods, or whatever we need. Okay, so get phone, returns phone, and get email, returns email. It's uppercase E there, so get phone, get name, uppercase N, uppercase P, uppercase E. Make sure your case is always right. Then we'll do the same for the setters, or the mutators. So these are the accessor methods or the getters. We'll do the same for the mutators, the ones that can change class data, public. We're going to make ours void methods because we're not returning anything. But if we wanted to make sure the setting was valid or not, or was successful or not, we could return an int or a bool or something else to indicate whether it was successful. We're just keeping it simple at this stage. So set name. I'm going to pass in a string called name. Control C down there. And we're just going to do that. So this dot name equals name. So in other words, the class field name is equal to the name passed in. And set, so this is going to be set phone. Set phone. It's going to be phone with lowercase p. This dot phone equals phone. This is going to be email. Email, set email there with uppercase E. Okay, so that's pretty good. And a quick toString. Public string, toString. And we're going to return, we could do all sorts of fancy stuff here with string.format. Let's just return with, actually let's do a string format. Let's make it so it's nice and neat on the output. Okay, so string.format. We're going to return a nice string representation of our data where names are all 20 characters long. So string.format. %s just returns the name, whatever string it is. 20s returns it 20 characters wide, but right justified. And -20s returns it 20 characters wide, but left justified. So you've got name and then spaces, which is what we want. We're going to display it on a nice tabular. And then name. And the same for phone and email. Phone, email. Okay, just our this. So this is a standard data class for all objects you need to deal with in your code. You're going to create a class much like this. Default constructor, at least one parameterized constructor for flexibility. The accessor methods or the getters, the mutator methods, the ones that can change class data, also called the setters. And a toString. That's sort of the basics you're going to do for each class you create, each data class. Okay. So now we've got a data class. We can now create student objects in our add student. When we click add student, back to student admin panel or back to student admin panel. Yep. Student add controller. So we're going to student add controller. So here we're back into our method that did all the validation when they click add student. Okay. We've done all the validation. Everything's valid. Now we're ready to create a student. So I can say student S is equal to the new student. And we want to pass through the 3 bits of information that we need. We're going to pass through the name, which is name text field, .get text. And we want to make sure we're not passing through names with lots of leading and trailing spaces. So let's grab that trim as well. So name text field .get text .trim. We'll grab that and pass that through as the first parameter to the constructor. And we'll also pass through the phone. So phone.getText.trim, grab all that, Control C, Control V, paste that through as a second parameter. And the third one, email text field.getText, .trim. We'll place that through as a third parameter. And then close your round brackets, and then semicolon on the end. So we've created a student. What are we going to do with them? Before we move on, we might just talk about things quickly. So you might notice I'm going name text field.getText several times, and phone text field, an email text field.getText.trim, email.getText, contains. If you want to sort of make your code a little bit more efficient, and this is a small thing, but not a bad thing to do, what you can do is you can get these fields just once, these name text field.getText.trim, get that just once, and then just use that as from then on. So let's do that. String email is equal to, let's do name first. Name equals name text field.getText.trim. Okay, and I'll call my name string. And so from then on, when I can do name text field.getText.trim, I'm just going to go name string. In other words, we get the data out of the text field once, not 15 times. Okay, so name string.length. And whenever we need to use name text field, we'll just use name string. Okay, just shortens our code, makes our code simpler. We get the data once in the GUI component, and we don't have to touch the GUI component again. Let's do the same for phone. So phone string is equal to phone text field. Okay, so phone string, whenever we see phone text, we're now going to replace it with phone text.getText.trim. Going to call it phone string. And down here, it's going to be phone string. Okay, just making our code shorter and sweeter down below, less complicated. Let's do the same for email. See what the email text field.getText.trim, email string is equal to email text field.getText.trim. Okay, so we're doing the trimming all at the start, and that's what we're going to validate. So down here, it's instead of email text field, it's just email string, and down here, instead of email text field.getText, it's just email string. Okay. And like I said, there's a lot more validation we could do on email. We're not even going to talk about that in this video. It's too much. Okay, so we've got a student. Now what are we going to do with them? Let's create an array list. And I'll do it before the GUI components. I like putting my data before actually, after the GUIs are fine. Doesn't really matter. We'll put that curly bracket over there though. Okay, so we're going to create our class data now. So these are the GUI components we're accessing from the SceneBuilder that we created. Now we're going to create some of our own data components, and we'll create an array list of student, and we'll call that stud, or students. Students array list. Why don't we call it students array list? Okay. So ArrayList hasn't been imported yet. You need to do a Java util import for that. So we'll do that. Java util.ArrayList. Okay, let's fix up that error. Now we want to create this array list and initialize it. And we'll do that in our initialize method. We could do it up here if we wanted to, but we've got the initialize method. Let's make use of it. Student array list equals new array list. Now people who see me write code, and again, because I've corrected so many students' codes over the years, from Java 7 onwards, you can leave out the data type here because you put it here. You don't need to put it twice. You know, put student there as well. But I tend to like putting that in still. Okay, only because I've seen so many students create an array list of something up here and then think it's something different down here. Okay, so that's just me again. I tend to write bulletproof code that can't be misunderstood because I've just seen so many errors with students over the years. Now that I've been in this method, I'm going to put the curly bracket over there to make it so they line up nice and neat. Yep. If you don't like that, I'm sorry, but when you've corrected, when you're correcting 5 or 10 curly bracket errors a lesson, a class, you drum it into students, keep them in line, and you can't get things out of whack. Keep your code neat and keep your curly brackets in line. When you open one, close one. And when you quick that 10, 15, 20 times a lesson, you just write code like that to make it so that's what your students are going to do as well. You lead by example. Okay, now we're going to ArrayList. We can add our student to it. Down here, when we've got everything valid and we've created our student, we can now add our student to the ArrayList. Students ArrayList.add s. Simple as that. If you want to now clear all the inputs, you could clear the inputs as well at this stage, or just leave them in place in case people want to change things slightly and add another student with similar sort of spellings and whatever. Whatever you want to do. But now we've added the student to the text field. The data's safe and preserved, validated, checked, everything's fine. Now, I will say something, and this is what I talk about with my students as well. This class here, the student class, owns the student data. It's the keeper of the data. This is a master record of the student data for a student. Okay, so this class knows about the data. This class should be the class that validates the data as well. So really the validation should be happening maybe here in the parameterized constructor. Okay, that's probably where it should be happening. But at this stage, we've done it in our add controller because we haven't quite done enough Java yet to make it worthwhile doing it in the student class. We need to do exception handling and a few other things before we can move the validation into here. But the idea is we do the validation here and throw exceptions, and the add controller we just do try catch, try and create a new student, and if they need to catch anything, then we can work out which error we need to display. Okay, but we haven't done enough Java at this stage for my students yet. Okay, we haven't done exception handling. So at this stage, I've got all the validation here in the GUI, in the controller, which isn't the way things would normally work. Normally, you just come straight down to here and go try and create a student, catch, and then deal with whatever you need to display. Okay. But we haven't done enough Java yet, so that's why we're developing it this way. So people are saying, Michael, you shouldn't be writing code on that, or Moose, you shouldn't be writing code on that, because my students haven't done enough Java yet. Okay, we do things in a certain order, and I've got to follow that order. Got to be able to walk before you can run. Okay, so now we've got students being added to the array list. Okay, so what are we going to do with that data? Well, we don't know yet. Let's come down here. Clear inputs. So this is our clear all button. When I click the clear all, we want to clear all the inputs. And so we've got name text field, dot set text. So we're sending a text to the text field, uppercase T, to empty string. We're clearing the string. And phone and email. Phone and email. So we're just clearing the inputs that are on that add a student's screen. If you want to display a dialog, are you sure you want to clear them? You could put a confirmation dialog here. If show message dialog, if JOptionPane.show confirmation dialog, if that returns a yes, so click the yes button or OK button, you could do the clear then. Okay, we might worry about that sort of thing later. And again, you could put a confirmation dialog here. Changing back to the main menu. Let's go back into our main menu and look at our controller. And you'll see we haven't regenerated the controller yet since we added all the different buttons. Add a student, display all students, add a whatever. Okay, so we're going to click on our FXML and right click and go make controller. So we're refreshing the controller with the latest. Okay, back to controller. And again, not much there. Okay, maybe I haven't named things yet. So let's go back to our. Okay, and I haven't named things, I don't think. Okay, so the add a student button we want to call add a student. Okay, or just add student, not add a student, add student button. This is display all students button. This is, well, might as well add them in, add course button. That's the name we want to refer to it in code. Display all courses button. And exit button, which is going to exit the application. Okay, so we've given them all an ID or a name in our code. Now let's assign them a handler as well. Handler. Okay, so add a student's now going to run add a student handler. Display all students is now going to run a display all students handler. Add a course or add course is going to add a course handler. Display all courses is going to display all courses handler. And exit is going to be the exit button handler. So now you get names that match the buttons. That's nice way to do it. Control S. Let's go back to NetBeans, and we'll right click on the FXML and go make controller. And now we get all the buttons come through. Okay. So last thing we're going to do for this video is just wire up the add a student button. So we jump across. And again, we're using our utility class. We're going to come back over here and look at our code here. And that's what we did when we returned to main menu. So we're going to Control C on that. Back to our main menu controller. And when we go to add a student, we want to run the code that opens our student add fxml controller.fxml. So we'll open that fxml there. So when we click add a student button or add student button, we want to open a scene which is student add fxml. Okay. Let's run that. This is our first build. We've actually been writing code very naughtily. We should have compiled and built often. Trouble with me is I get in a flow and I can't stop writing code. I should have been compiling and building often. But let's do a clean build. With some errors. Okay, and the issue being raised is our I cannot find symbol utility change to scene. Okay, utility change to scene. That's because we didn't change the package in our utility Java. When we dragged it over from the other project, it was still showing still containing the other package. So we need student admin app. Okay, student admin app. Instead of multiple scenes, student admin app. Okay, that should take care of those errors. Student admin app. Oh, and of course you've got to add a throws clause for the exception. Add a throws clause. Yep. So if we're changing scenes, we'd have to have that throws clause on our method. Okay, so let's fix that error. We've got one more to go in the student in the add. When we change it back to the main menu, right click on that, and we're going to add a throws. So we're just adding that throws exception there because the change to scene method can throw an exception. Again, we haven't done exceptions yet for my students, so we're coming onto all this sort of stuff. But don't worry, it'll all come together in future weeks as well. I'm trying to keep things as simple as I can without bringing in everything that we need to know to develop proper Java applets in the right way. Generally modify things as we go through the term. Okay, so now we should be able to clean and build, hopefully. Yep, no errors. Nice. Let's go run. And we've got add a student. Let's go add a student and return to main menu. So our add student and our multiple scenes is working. And none of these buttons are wired up yet. There's handlers there, but they don't do anything yet. Exit doesn't do anything, so none of those work. Let's go back to add a student, and we'll click add a student. And name cannot be blank. So I'll type in a name. Phone cannot be blank. I'll just type in, doesn't matter. We haven't done a length check on our digits or anything, so email cannot be blank. I'll type in moose, and it'll say it's got to contain an ampersand because it doesn't contain an ampersand. So now that's going to make a valid email, which isn't valid, of course, but that's good enough for our checking so far. Okay, and we don't know what happened. We didn't say student created or anything, so maybe we're going to pop up a dialog saying student created. Okay, so let's see that. So when we created the student in our student add, we want to display a message here, show a message to the user saying that the student was created or added to the ArrayList or added to the database. So we'll go J option pane dot show message dialog null, and we want to say success student created. That'll do. Not a good message, but that'll do. That'll do for what we need. And a semicolon on the end. Okay, so let's give that a try. Compile, build, and run. Just add a student, moose, any old thing, and whatever with an ampersand, and add a student, and we've got the student created successfully. Okay, so like I said, we could also now erase the inputs here if we wanted to. Set name text field dot set text to double quotes and so on for those text fields, and then you've got a clean slate for adding another student if you want to. It's up to you if you want to do that, or it's up to the whatever project you're working on if you want to do that. Okay, but you could clear inputs here as well if you wanted to. That's probably enough for this video, I think. We've made quite a long video, so we've only got two scenes, but we've got the main menu and we've got an add a student scene. Okay, and we're adding them to an array. In future videos, we'll work out what we're going to do with this array, what we can do with it, because we need to display all students. How we can do that. So we'll work those out in the future. Okay, hope that was useful. Thanks for watching. Have a nice day. Don't forget to click the like if you like the video. Just helps a little bit to say that you're interested. Oh, we've got some errors coming up down here because we've got multiple versions of Java on our machine, and there's an old version that's being used. Okay. Thanks for watching. Have a nice day.